Sorry, you're in the wrong seat. I need you to move right now." The woman's voice was cold and firm, slicing through the quiet of the Horizon Air Flight 982, first class cabin. Clara Jennings, 41, tall, with a straight posture and a uniform pressed to perfection, stood in the aisle under the harsh white LED lights that caught the metallic glint of the badge on her chest. Her arms were crossed, her body forming a wall between the passenger and seat 2A. Malcolm Harris, 48, looked up from a stack of merger contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, his eyes meeting Clara's commanding stare. Behind her, a middle-aged white man, Gregory Shaw, 46, tapped the toe of his leather shoe against the carpet in an impatient, almost condescending rhythm. "This is my seat, ma'am," Malcolm said slowly, holding up his boarding pass for first class, with his name clearly printed. Clara didn't bother to look closely. She snatched the ticket from his hand, her voice icy. "Anyone can print a fake ticket. This passenger," she jerked her chin toward Gregory, "paid for a first-class seat and will be sitting here. Please gather your things and move to the back, where you belong." The air in the cabin seemed to drop a few degrees. Those nearby held their breath. A young woman in seat 2B, Sophie Lee, 29, quietly tilted her phone and tapped the live stream button. The screen read, "Live, 3 viewers." Have you ever been treated like you didn't deserve to be somewhere you paid to be? From the intercom, the lead flight attendant's voice announced, "We'll be departing in 18 minutes. Please take your seats." But Clara remained where she was, as if the hundreds of passengers' time mattered less than her control. With 12 years of experience and dozens of seat disputes behind her, every move she made was deliberate. Arms folded, chin tilted, voice lowered but loud enough for nearby rows to hear. "We have a real first-class passenger waiting, and you're holding up the entire flight." Gregory stepped forward half a pace, rotating his wrist to show off a gleaming Swiss watch. "Finally, someone who knows how to do their job," he said, his tone smug. "I have a connecting flight in Atlanta. Can't be delayed because of this." He let the sentence trail off, but everyone understood the implication. Malcolm remained seated, his leather briefcase steady on his lap. Inside were contracts, adjustment clauses, numbers that could shift a corporation's market value. But now he simply reached for another card. Platinum Elite. Same name, same seat number. "Ma'am, I've been flying with this airline for 8 years. Platinum member." Clara waved it off. "Fake cards are everywhere. I've dealt with plenty of people trying to upgrade illegally. Our procedures are clear. When there's a seat dispute, passengers follow crew instructions. Any complaints? Come later." Sophie adjusted her phone to capture the light glinting off Clara's badge, Malcolm's steady gaze, and Gregory's irritated expression. Across the screen, the words appeared, #Flight 982, discrimination unfolding. Viewers jumped from 3 to 12 to 46, and comments began pouring in. A few rows back, an elderly couple whispered. A man in business attire in seat 4C shook his head. "Just sit down, buddy. Coach has seats too." Malcolm's phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from his assistant read, "Airline board meeting tomorrow. Washington Post asking about investment." He ignored it, focusing on the moment. To the eyes around him, he wasn't a man who owned nearly a quarter of the airline, just a black man in the wrong seat. "Sir, if you don't comply, I will call security." Clara's voice rose as her hand touched her radio. "You are delaying the flight. That's a federal violation." Murmurs rippled through the cabin. "This is insane." "Just let him sit. We're wasting time." But Clara had made up her mind. Backing down meant losing face in front of passengers and colleagues. Malcolm inhaled deeply, staying still. In his mind, the exact wording of Federal Aviation Regulations Part 250 flashed in bold: the rights and obligations of passengers. He knew the law, but he also knew that one wrong move and the story could be twisted into unruly passenger. A flight attendant from economy, Derek Collins, appeared, looking uneasy. "Clara, his ticket." "Back to your position, Derek. I'll handle this." Derek swallowed his words and walked away. A few passengers exchanged glances, recognizing the layers of authority playing out right there in the cabin. Malcolm opened his briefcase slightly and pulled out a business card. Clara frowned. "Close that, sir. This isn't your office. Maybe you should call your supervisor." "I don't need to call anyone. I have full authority in this cabin. You can leave voluntarily or be escorted off." Sophie's live stream now had over 1,000 viewers. The elderly woman in 3A gasped softly. Gregory's expression shifted. His desire for the seat weighed against not wanting to be the face of a scandal streaming across the internet. Malcolm's phone buzzed again. "Media picking up #Nashter Flight 982. He silenced it, his eyes meeting Clara's, calm, but with a new current running beneath. He knew exactly where he stood, at the center of a billion-dollar corporate crisis, one he could steer himself. "You're delaying the flight. 13 minutes to departure." Clara enunciated each word. Sophie's live. 1,047 viewers. Malcolm stayed quiet, but inside his briefcase, the Harris Protocol draft, a $165 million overhaul plan, waited for the right moment to become a weapon. No one in the cabin knew that just a few more words could flip the balance of power entirely. The announcement came over the intercom. "Horizon Air Flight 982 will depart in 12 minutes. This is the final call for passengers at Gate B12. Clara Jennings tightened her grip on the radio, her voice hissing through clenched teeth. "Ground control. This is Jennings on Flight 982. Requesting supervisor and security to the gate immediately. Passenger is non-compliant and refusing to follow crew instructions." Her words spread through the cabin like a public indictment. Sophie Lee tilted her phone, framing Clara's expression, the call for backup, and Malcolm Harris, still seated, eyes fixed on his documents. The live stream surged to 3,200 viewers in just 30 seconds. Comments exploded. "Hold your seat! Don't let them throw you out! Zoom in on that flight attendant's face! Tag the press right now!" From the back of the cabin, a figure appeared. Patricia Gomez, lead flight attendant, 40, 5, hair neatly pinned, walking briskly toward Clara. Her voice was low and steady, but her eyes favored her colleague. "What's going on here?" "Passenger in 2A refuses to give up the seat to a paying first-class customer. Ticket and membership card show signs of being fake," Clara reported quickly, unable to hide her irritation. Gregory Shaw immediately jumped in. "I paid full price for this seat. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever experienced." Patricia glanced at the ticket Malcolm handed over, but before she could speak, Clara leaned in and whispered in her ear. Patricia's face shifted as if she had just heard something important. "Sir," Patricia said, returning the ticket, "we can arrange a seat in premium economy. It will only take a moment to move you." Malcolm replied calmly, "I purchased this seat. It's confirmed. I will sit where I belong." Sophie's live stream hit 4,800 viewers. The hashtag #Flight982 discrimination began trending on Twitter. Comments hit the airline like arrows. "Never flying this airline again. Who's got the corporate hotline number? Call now. Send this clip to CNN." A large man appeared at the aircraft door. Michael Turner, 50, ground supervisor. He stepped in as Clara briefed him. "Fake ticket, none. Compliant, delaying the flight." Michael nodded, scanning the cabin before stopping at Malcolm. "Sir, I need you to step outside so we can resolve this." Protests erupted. "This is discrimination. Check the ticket first. Don't throw him off." The cabin split into two camps, those saying, "Let him sit," and those saying, "Just move so we can leave." To Malcolm, all the noise felt as if it were behind thick glass. He heard every word, but focused only on his own breathing. Michael took another step. "We don't want to make a scene, but if you don't cooperate, security will get involved." At that moment, Officer Denise Clark, 39, airport security, stepped forward. She was the only black member of the group and had watched Sophie's live stream on her way from the office to the gate. She understood the bigger picture before she even entered the cabin. "Sir, let me see your ticket and ID." Malcolm handed them over. Denise examined them carefully. Seat number, booking code, seat selection timestamp, all perfect. "Documents are valid," Denise said slowly, glancing at Michael. "But the lead flight attendant has full authority to reassign seats," Michael cut in. The intercom chimed, 8 minutes to departure." The time pressure hung in the air like a ticking clock in an action movie. Patricia made her decision. "If you don't move, we'll have to revoke your right to fly with our airline entirely." Malcolm rose, slowly, deliberately. The cabin went silent. Every phone pointed at him. Clara tilted her chin slightly, a hint of a smirk at the corner of her mouth. "You should have listened when I was still being nice." Sophie's live stream now had 12,400 viewers. Among the comments appeared the account of a reporter from the Global Business Daily, followed by a fresh tweet, "Horizon Air Flight 982, discrimination incident." Streaming live, main subject, major investor. Malcolm's phone buzzed non-stop. Assistant, lawyer, partners. He didn't answer. Instead, he opened his briefcase and drew out a thick, white business card with silver, embossed letters. "Malcolm Harris, Chief Executive Officer, Harris Global Capital." He handed it to Patricia. She glanced at it, and her eyes changed instantly, recognizing the name, not just from financial news, but from closed-door meetings within the airline. "Call the regional director immediately," Malcolm said, his voice low but impossible to ignore. "Tell them Harris Global Capital wants to discuss an $847 million investment in Horizon Air." The air in the cabin froze. Clara's breath caught. Michael Turner squinted, as if reading the company name on the card was decoding a secret. Malcolm pulled out a second document, a certificate of preferred stock ownership, Series A, granting him 23.7% voting rights in Horizon Air. Sophie's camera caught the papers, broadcasting them to thousands of phones. The live stream soared past 18,000 viewers. The comments exploded. "Plot twist! He's a major shareholder in the airline. This company is done for." "We bought in last month," Malcolm said evenly, as if reading a quarterly report. "The largest deal in the company's history. Tomorrow, the board meets to finalize a plan for diversity and anti-bias measures." Clara's hand went to her neck, as if to steady her pulse. Gregory Shaw froze, his freshly poured champagne suddenly meaningless. Denise Clark stepped back, understanding that the power dynamic had shifted completely. "This flight," Malcolm continued, "was chosen for a service audit. And tonight, you've given me data more valuable than any report." Michael Turner, now flustered, spoke into his radio. "Ground control urgent. Need regional director on board. Priority code Alpha." The cabin was silent except for Sophie's camera and the pounding in Clara's chest. The elderly couple in 3A stared wide-eyed. The man in 4C closed his laptop, listening to every word. Malcolm fully opened his briefcase, pulling out a thick file. Harris Protocol. Confidential Board Review. The words Civil Rights Compliance Audit bold on the cover. "These documents," Malcolm said, lifting the file, "are the plan for a company-wide bias audit. Phase 1 is field testing. And tonight, Ms. Jennings, Mr. Turner, you have provided perfect evidence for the report." Clara's knees weakened, her hand gripping the nearest seat for support. 12 years of experience had just turned into 12 years of evidence. In her mind, dozens of moments of treating black passengers differently flooded back, chilling her spine. "The Federal Aviation Administration will receive this report," Malcolm continued, producing another stamped document. "And tonight's incident will become a federal case file." Gregory Shaw mumbled, I didn't know. It was just a misunderstanding." "No, Mr. Shaw," Malcolm replied, his gaze like a laser. "You confirmed the act of discrimination, making yourself both a witness and an accomplice. The phrase, 'know your place,' you just said, will become Exhibit A in training sessions." Sophie's live stream passed 25,000 viewers. A passenger in row 5 whispered, "This is better than Netflix." Laughter mixed with scattered applause. Malcolm unlocked his phone, showing Horizon Air's after-hours stock price dropping, minus $230 per share in 15 minutes, wiping out $4.1 billion in market value. "This," he said, holding the screen out to Patricia, "is the price of one customer service failure." Clara's face turned pale. Michael Turner stared at the floor, realizing the consequences went far beyond any training scenario. Malcolm listed, "BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street are watching. If I announce I'm pulling out, they will follow. That's $2.3 billion in institutional capital gone in days." No one spoke. The sound of the engines idling, waiting for takeoff clearance, felt like drums pounding in every chest. He paused, his gaze sweeping over Clara, Michael, Gregory. "You have just received the most expensive customer service lesson in aviation history. The question is, what will you do next?" The cabin door swung open. A woman in her 50s, wearing a dark blue blazer with a gold nameplate, Elaine Roberts, Regional Director, entorstom. Her face was as grave as if she'd run through a burning hallway. Mr. Harris, Elaine shook his hand immediately, skipping all formalities. I'd like to speak with you right now. Malcolm closed his briefcase, his expression calm. Then we will speak. But remember, I didn't come here for an apology. I came to make change. Sophie's screen showed 31,000 viewers. Shares, retweets, and the hashtag #HarrisProtocol began to spread. Outside, the night sky remained dark, but inside Horizon Air, Flight 982's first-class cabin, a power play had begun, and Malcolm Harris now held all the rules. Elaine Roberts stood tall, both hands gripping a folder as if it contained the entire fate of the airline. The cabin lights reflected along her cheekbones, tracing a cold, sharp line. She took a deep breath, steadying her breathing under the weight of dozens of eyes fixed on her. Malcolm Harris remained seated in 2A, his leather briefcase closed but still resting neatly on the tray table like an unlocked safe. In front of him, his phone screen glowed, displaying Sophie Lee's live stream count, 35,214 viewers and climbing. Mr. Harris, Elaine began, I have been authorized to resolve this situation quickly and respectfully. Malcolm tilted his head, his voice low but cutting through the air clearly, respectfully. Ms. Roberts, what just happened here was not simply a lack of respect. This was a textbook case of systemic bias, and it has been recorded, streamed live, and broadcast worldwide. Clara Jennings, standing 3 paces away, was frozen like a statue, her right hand unconsciously gripping the back of the nearest seat. Michael Turner tried to appear composed, but his fingers tapped an erratic rhythm on his radio. Gregory Shaw slumped into the seat Malcolm had originally occupied, avoiding everyone's gaze. Elaine kept her tone steady. I understand the severity, but let's find a reasonable solution, Malcolm cut in, his voice now sharper, the pace quickening like a lawyer pressing an advantage in court. A reasonable solution? In the past 12 minutes, Horizon Air's market capitalization has dropped $4.1 billion in after-hours trading, because one of your employees decided that the color of my skin was reason enough to question valid documents. Roberts swallowed hard, and Sophie's camera caught it perfectly. Comments poured in. She's sweating now. This is a real CEO. Ask for compensation. Malcolm slowly opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick, spiral-bound document. Harris Protocol, Diversity and Compliance Reform Plan. He set it on the tray table, turning the cover toward Elaine. Ms. Roberts, I will give you a choice. His voice was no longer angry, but cold, precise, and calculated. Accept this entire plan within 24 hours, or Harris Global Capital will begin the divestiture process, withdrawing the entire $847 million investment, and publicly informing every other major shareholder. Elaine flipped open the cover. The first page listed 5 key points with costs and timelines. Malcolm read them aloud, each point like a gavel striking the bench. Point 1. 40 hours of mandatory bias recognition and response training for all front-line staff, with annual recertification. Cost, $23 million per year. Point 2. Real-time AI monitoring system to analyze passenger, employee interactions and flag potential bias for immediate managerial review. Implementation cost, $67 million, with $12 million per year in maintenance. Point 3. The creation of an independent civil rights ombudsman position, reporting directly to Horizon Air's CEO, with authority to terminate employees for violations. Budget: $8 million per year. Point 4. Quarterly diversity audits by a third party, publicly released and filed with the Federal Aviation Administration. Cost: $5 million per quarter. Point 5. A $50 million scholarship fund for minority communities to train pilots, aviation engineers, and service staff. Elaine scanned the numbers, her mind calculating the budget impact. 162, $5 million for the first year, $70 million annually thereafter. A large sum, but far smaller than the losses if a major investor pulled out. Malcolm leaned forward, resting his hand lightly on the document. You have 24 hours. After that, I will hold a press conference, and I will say exactly what happened here. Clara stepped back slightly. Michael Turner frowned, as if wanting to speak but swallowing the words. Sophie's live stream now read 42,000 viewers, with news outlets like CNN, Reuters, and Bloomberg joining the comments. An account verified as FAA News posted, "We are contacting Mr. Harris for details." Roberts took a deep breath. Mr. Harris, I do not have the authority to approve the entire reform package immediately. I need— No, Malcolm interrupted, his tone now crisp and contract-like. You need to decide whether you will be the one delivering good news to the board, or the first name on the list held responsible when the stock plummets and shareholders erupt. First class had become an impromptu boardroom, and every gaze was locked on the man who had been accused of having a fake ticket 15 minutes earlier, now holding the fate of the airline in his hands. Malcolm leaned back, crossing his arms. And let me remind you, Harris Global Capital controls 23.7% of the voting power. Another $2.3 billion in institutional capital is ready to follow me. If you think this is a threat, you're right, but it is also your only opportunity. A passenger in row 5 called out, "Sign it! What are you waiting for?" Laughter and scattered applause rippled through the cabin. Elaine turned to Clara and Michael. "Step outside now. I need to speak with Mr. Harris alone." Her tone left no room for argument. Clara looked like she wanted to protest, but Elaine's icy stare silenced her. Once the cabin door closed, Elaine lowered her voice. "Mr. Harris, if I agree, can you guarantee there will be no further damage to the brand?" Malcolm gave a faint smile. The kind of smile someone gives after reading a quarterly profit report that exceeds projections. "Ms. Roberts, I am not here to destroy the brand. I am here to save it. But to save it, the rot has to be cut out. Right now." He slid the document toward Elaine, along with a pen. "Just sign here, a preliminary commitment, and I will withhold public comment until the plan is formally announced." Elaine looked into his eyes, then at the live stream still rolling. The truth was, there was no more silence to keep. The world had already seen and heard, but signing was the only way to retain some control over the narrative. She signed, the stroke firm and decisive. Sophie's camera caught the exact moment the signature closed on the page. The comments exploded. "She signed! Victory! Harris Protocol begins." Malcolm folded the document and returned it to his briefcase. "You have just given Horizon Air a chance to change," Don't waste it. The engines began to spool up, the pilots preparing for takeoff. But everyone in first class knew the flight had already taken a completely different course. Malcolm settled back into 2A, Gregory Shaw keeping his head down as he quietly moved back to his original seat. Clara and Michael disappeared into the rear cabin, bracing for the calls they knew were coming. On Malcolm's phone, an email from his office read, "Major outlets requesting interviews. Horizon Air stock down 11% after hours." He typed a brief reply. "Wait for official statement in 24 hours." Malcolm leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. Beneath the hum of the engines, he could hear his own heartbeat, not from tension, but from knowing he had just turned what seemed like a disadvantage into a lever of power. Tomorrow, in Horizon Air's boardroom, the Harris Protocol would no longer be a draft. It would be a mandate, one that would transform the airline service culture entirely. The glass tower of Horizon Air's headquarters in the city center gleamed under the sunlight. But inside, the air was thick, like a courtroom just before the judge enters. On the 27th floor, in the executive boardroom, a polished walnut round table stood beneath a massive LED screen, surrounded by 14 high-backed leather chairs. Malcolm Harris walked in, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit and a deep blue tie. He wasn't alone. Beside him was Sandra Blake, head of legal at Harris Global Capital, and Owen Patel, an ESG specialist who had advised the United Nations. At the head of the table sat Robert Langford, Horizon Air's CEO, 58, his face tense, his hands gripping a folder so tightly it was crumpled. Next to him was Elaine Roberts, the regional director who had signed the Harris Protocol the night before, her eyes still red as if she hadn't slept. Robert began, his voice trying to hold authority, but slightly hoarse. "Mr. Harris, we officially apologize for the incident on Flight 982 last night. The behavior of flight attendant Clara Jennings was unacceptable. The leadership team has been in emergency meetings all night." Malcolm pulled out a chair and sat as though this were his own boardroom. "Good. Then I want to hear the results." Robert glanced at Elaine, then read aloud, "Clara Jennings, employment terminated immediately, with a record of 17 prior complaints for disrespect toward passengers, 11 of which involved passengers of color." Malcolm gave a slight nod, his eyes never leaving Robert. "Michael Turner, suspended for 30 days without pay, required to complete 80 hours of bias recognition training, barred from customer, facing duties until he passes the final assessment. Gregory Shaw, the passenger, will be added to the passenger misconduct database, shared across Skylink Alliance member airlines." The room was silent for several seconds. These decisions had clearly been made under pressure, yet they still weren't enough for Malcolm. He leaned forward, his voice dropping low but resonating. "An acceptable first step. But remember, I'm not here to deal with 3 individuals. I'm here to change the entire system." He tapped the Harris Protocol folder lightly. "We start today." Sandra Blake opened her case and pulled out a 12-page contract, titled in bold, Binding Implementation Agreement, Harris Protocol Compliance. Owen Patel connected his laptop to the large screen, displaying charts and statistics. 847 discrimination complaints in the past 12 months, 68% involving minority passengers, a 34% increase over the previous year, 12 cases had already been covered negatively by the media. Malcolm let the numbers speak for themselves. No one in the room dared to interrupt. Robert swallowed hard. The first-year implementation cost, $165 million, is a large figure, especially with the airline industry still recovering from the pandemic. Malcolm replied sharply, his pace quickening. $165 million is an investment. Compare that to the $4.1 billion in market value you lost in just 15 minutes last night. And don't forget, I can make that number $8 billion if we fail to reach agreement. Elaine Roberts shot Robert a look that said clearly, "Don't try to negotiate." Malcolm continued, his voice part lecture, part verdict. Point 1. Mandatory training begins next Monday. All frontline employees, from flight attendants to ticket counter staff, must complete 40 hours within 90 days. Fail, and they don't continue working. Point 2. The AI monitoring system contract will go to Data Ethics AI. I spoke with their CEO this morning. Pilot programs at JFK, LAX, and DFW for 6 months, then system-wide rollout. Point 3. The independent ombudsman position. I already have a short list of candidates, including a former federal prosecutor and a former NAACP investigations director. Robert began to speak, but Sandra raised her hand, signaling him to stop. Owen switched slides, revealing a diagram of the Horizon Diversity Fund. Malcolm spoke slowly, each word deliberate. $50 million, not a P expense. This is an investment in the future workforce. We will create a generation of pilots, engineers, and customer service leaders that other airlines will dream of hiring. His gaze swept across the board members, lingering on those whose faces still showed hesitation. Robert leaned back, sighing. "Mr. Harris, the board will approve. But we need one thing, that you remain silent with the media until we announce this officially." Malcolm allowed himself a small smile. "I can remain silent for 24 hours. After that, if I don't see a press release with a commitment to implementation, I'll hold my own press conference." The air tightened like a drawn bowstring. Robert looked at Elaine. She nodded. "All right. We'll announce within 24 hours. Malcolm closed the folder and signaled Sandra and Owen to pack up. "Then this meeting is over. I'll return in 1 quarter to review progress." As he stood, Robert blurted out, "Mr. Harris, why choose this route? You could sue. You could handle this quietly." Malcolm turned, his eyes like blades. "Because silence changes nothing. But financial pressure, applied just right, can change an entire industry." Leaving the boardroom, Malcolm stepped into the glass-lined hallway overlooking the bright streets below. His phone rang, an unfamiliar number. He answered, "Mr. Harris, this is the U.S. Department of Transportation. We'd like to discuss integrating the Harris Protocol as an industry standard." Malcolm replied with one word, "Good. Let's meet this week." Meanwhile, in another room at headquarters, Clara Jennings sat across from a union lawyer, her face pale. "Clara," the lawyer said, "your 17 prior complaints were enough for termination, but last night's incident will become industry-wide training material. Prepare yourself." Michael Turner received an email from HR. "Suspension effective immediately. Mandatory training scheduled to follow within 48 hours. He leaned back in his chair, feeling the power he once had evaporate. Gregory Shaw sat in his consulting firm's office, staring at a termination letter. Reason: inappropriate conduct, violation of diversity and inclusion policy. At a cafe near the airport, Sophie Lee replayed her live stream, which had reached 2.8 million views overnight. Her phone buzzed non-stop. CNN, MSNBC, even Netflix wanted broadcast rights. She smiled and whispered, "This is just the beginning." On Twitter, #Harris Protocol ranked #1 worldwide. Other airlines quietly sent internal memos, review passenger dispute handling procedures immediately. Malcolm knew the domino effect had begun. And Horizon Air was only the first piece. Bright lights filled the International Aviation Diversity Conference in Chicago. Hanging across the main hall was a massive banner, Harris Protocol, from crisis to culture. Malcolm Harris stepped onto the stage in a navy suit and thin-rimmed glasses, a stack of notes in hand. Before him sat more than 800 representatives from airlines, investors, regulatory agencies, and journalists from 32 countries. Television cameras captured every step he took. "Ladies and gentlemen," Malcolm's voice was steady, warm yet sharp. 6 months ago, a first-class passenger was asked to leave his seat, not for safety reasons, not for procedural reasons, but because of the color of his skin. A pause hung in the air. Then he continued, "That passenger was me." Hundreds of cameras shifted quickly. The audience didn't need the video replay. Everyone had already seen it online. But hearing it from the man himself tightened the atmosphere. Malcolm raised his hand, and the screen behind him lit up with a chart. Discrimination complaints, down 47% industry, wide since the Harris Protocol was adopted. "We didn't just save Horizon Air," he said. "We forced an entire industry to change." Scene change, 6 months earlier. After Horizon Air signed the 24th hour agreement, the press release sparked shockwaves. Other airlines, from Pacific Sky to Aero Europa, immediately announced mandatory bias training programs, fearful of becoming the next target of investor pressure. The U.S. Department of Transportation issued the 2025 directive requiring all airlines to report discrimination incidents within 24 hours. The FAA mandated the integration of AI monitoring systems within 18 months. Back at the conference, Malcolm went on. The point was never just the fines or the drop in stock prices. The point is people. People like Marcus, a flight attendant who spoke up even when overruled by a superior. People like Security Officer Patricia Gomez, who stood by principle in a difficult moment. The screen showed Marcus in a new uniform, now Horizon Air's Director of Diversity Training, standing before a class of new hires. Then came a photo of Patricia receiving a medal from the Transportation Security Administration. But not everyone had a happy ending. Clara Jennings, the flight attendant who caused the incident, had become a cautionary example in training programs across the industry. A slide appeared in bold letters. "A single action can create billion-dollar consequences." Gregory Shaw, the passenger who took the seat, lost a $2 million consulting contract and was required to attend inclusion seminars to rehabilitate his image. Malcolm moved to center stage, no longer using the handheld microphone, letting his voice carry naturally. Numbers don't lie. $50 million from the Horizon Scholarship Fund have been awarded to 43 aviation students from minority communities. 11 are currently in pilot training. 1% of black business travelers have returned to airlines that adopted the Harris Protocol. A short video played. Sophie Lee, the young woman who live-streamed, now a CNN correspondent covering social justice. She stood at an airport gate, interviewing passengers. "I feel more respected." The flight attendants listen and explain everything clearly. Malcolm paused for a moment, then spoke slowly, as if engraving each word. "Discrimination is expensive. Accountability is profitable." He held up a report. Last quarter, Horizon Air achieved the highest customer satisfaction scores in company history, surpassing its SOPO, called Golden Years. Net profit was up 12% year over year. Robert Langford, Horizon's CEO, walked onto the stage, shaking Malcolm's hand for the cameras. "I once thought this reform would be a financial burden. Now I know it is the most profitable investment we've ever made." The applause was thunderous. Scene change, Horizon Air headquarters. On the wall, the Harris Protocol rollout chart was marked entirely in green. 100% of frontline staff had completed training. The AI system had issued 243 alerts in 3 months, helping resolve incidents before they escalated. Elsewhere in the city, Marcus was instructing a new class of trainees. No one buys a ticket to be insulted. They buy a ticket to get to their destination and to feel valued. Patricia Gomez sat in a Department of Transportation conference room, drafting new national security protocols for airport officers. Back at the conference, Malcolm closed his speech. Power does not just lie in boardroom seats or stock prices. True power lies in the ability to turn the right values into mandatory standards. He looked directly into the television cameras. "If you've ever been treated like you don't belong in a place you paid to be, remember, you are not alone, and you have the right to demand change." The hall lights dimmed, and the screen showed the final moment from Flight 982, the moment Malcolm returned to seat 2A after Clara and Gregory had left. The image slowed, the sound of the engines blending with the applause of the passengers. Words appeared, from one moment on a plane to a global movement. Outside the hall, investors spoke in animated clusters. A pension fund representative said, "The Harris Protocol will be our new ESG standard for every investment." European and Asian airlines scheduled meetings with Malcolm for the following week. The story had spread beyond aviation, hospitality, retail, healthcare, all beginning to ask, "Do we have our own Harris Protocol?" Malcolm stepped off the stage, accepting congratulations, but his eyes caught a group of students in Aviation Academy uniforms. A young woman approached, her voice trembling. "Mr. Harris, your scholarship helped me pursue my dream of becoming a pilot. I promise to treat every passenger fairly." Malcolm smiled. "Then I've made the right investment." Outside, a Horizon airplane took off, its tail painted with a new logo and the words "Every passenger matters" in small letters. The engines roared into the distance, blending into the blue sky. Malcolm knew the legacy of Flight 982 would live not just in financial reports or management case studies. It would live in every flight, every greeting, every respectful glance a passenger received. In any industry, Real power does not lie in the title printed on a business card, but in the ability to turn the right values into mandatory standards. Malcolm Harris has not only changed the way an airline operates, he is rewriting the definition of standard service. From the first class cabin all the way to the last row. In business, you can buy airplanes, you can buy a brand, you can even buy an advertising campaign. But you cannot buy genuine respect. It only comes when leaders are willing to step onto the front lines, to see firsthand how people are treated, when no one thinks they are being watched. If you believe that respect must come before profit, click. Like on this video, subscribe to follow the next dignity check, and leave a comment below with the words, "Keep dignity." Because change sometimes begins with a single sentence, and sometimes with an unflinching look.